And Yushen will mute, and Paul, you can be quiet in your own home or mute. And we are live now. We will start in about 3 minutes. I took this lovely book by a Filipino-American, Angela Trazo. I was reading it this morning with second and third graders. It's just such a uplifting.
Craig, I think I already started the event.
That's fine. I am speaking. Thank you very much. No, I'm just talking about the book. In general, you know, a librarian can't help himself. And while we're waiting for it to start, we have guests today. We have videos about amazing Asian American women. So I just took time this morning to read the stories of 32 inspirational Asian American women. And in just a couple minutes, we will start, as we promised, at 1:15 with Bookman's next chapter. Sometime today or this weekend, I hope that everybody will take a minute to talk about somebody who's inspiring you. We've made a Flipgrid that students have started to add to. If you're talking about your mom or your auntie, your grandmother or sister, somebody you know, there's a link for that in the Q&A. During Teams Live events, there's no chat. But if you have a question for me or for our guest, Paul Kurose, I hope that you put your question in and our moderator will see that. It's a little different than Teams meetings, but it's a fun way to get stories told. There's so many stories of so many amazing women during Women's History Month that I broke out today to focus on Asian American women. The first thing I did, if I may start, is to try to honor the women I work with. As a teacher, I'm surrounded at Dearborn Park more than a dozen Asian American women, and I want to honor them. And I asked a couple of them to tell you their stories. Here's Miss Muhammad Ali.
Hi, Dragons. Oh. My name is Miss Atia. I'm the admin secretary here at Dearborn Park, and I have 2 daughters here as students as well. One thing I hope you take from Women's History Month this year is to actually take a moment and watch the women in your life. They are probably doing amazing things, and we don't take the time to notice.
They do amazing things. Miss Atia in the front office. And Miss Muhammad Ali.
Hi, my name is Miriam Muhammad Ali. I born in Vietnam. My family came to US during 1981. I have 3 kids, all went to graduate from college. And my wish and dream for Asian girl is to work hard, don't give up, hope for yourselves, and be patient.
That's what we wish for all of our kids. Miss Muhammad Ali, Miss Atia, and all the other teachers at Dearborn Park, thank you for coming to school. Thank you for respecting and honoring the teachers in your life and the women in your life. And pay attention. They've got stories to tell. Who inspires you? I put this in the chat already earlier. This is a Flipgrid. It's an opportunity for students to record a story about an amazing woman. And like I say, it's in the chat. You can click on it later. But when I think about who inspires me, I do think about teachers. My first teacher, my mother, was a kindergarten teacher. My grandmother was a chemistry teacher. My grandfather was a mathematics teacher. And speaking of mathematics teachers, Aki Kurose is an inspirational woman who lived in Seattle and was a mathematics teacher, and her son, Paul Kurose, is going to be our guest today for Bookman's next chapter. Now, some of you may know Aki Kurose as the name of a middle school not far from Dearborn Park. But Paul, I look forward to hearing from you some stories about growing up with your mom and all the different things that she did. So, Miss Satia, if you would bring Paul's camera to us. Kids, let me introduce my friend, Paul Kurose. How are you, Paul? Go ahead.
I'm doing great. I think I just have to unmute, but I think I did it successfully.
You are.
Can hear me? All right. So I'm doing well, and I just have to start by saying what an honor it is and a privilege it is to be here with all of you today. Really miss in-person education, actually being out there with our students, and I appreciate Bookman inviting me to be here with you all today. So if you can't be there in person, it's next best thing. So thank you.
Well, kids, the backstory is a number of years ago, probably more than 20, Paul and his wife, Kathleen Vasquez, and their son, Kenji, were students of mine in that kindergarten age. And now Kenji, some of you may know because he helped with Camp Read-A-Rama a couple summers ago. But Paul teaches mathematics at North Seattle College and at Seattle University. And Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about your path to education? And that, I'm sure, can lead to some stories about your mom.
Well, I grew up in the central area. That's actually where my mom was born and raised, and then my dad as well. And then they raised their family there in the central area. I attended Madrona Elementary School. And back in those days, they weren't called middle schools. They were called junior high schools. I attended Meany. And then I was bused as part of desegregation efforts to desegregate Seattle schools, because Meany Junior High at that time was almost all kids of color. I got bused out to the north end of Seattle. And then when I got to high school, my parents got an opportunity to send me to Lakeside High School. I was able to get a scholarship to attend Lakeside High School. It's a private high school in the North End, and I went to high school with Bill Gates. And so I got really high quality teaching because I had the same teachers that the richest kids in Seattle had. And as a result, I was very successful in math, learning math, went on and got my master's degree in math. And then when it came around to deciding what I was going to do with it, it was already pretty much decided I was going to be a teacher. So that was kind of my path. Seeing the need for teachers of color growing up. And then later on, when it was my time, there was just something that was just, yeah, this needs to be done. So I appreciate seeing all the staff at Dearborn Park and meeting some of them there. Yeah. It's really great to see that.
It is really important that we have teachers who look like the students that the school serves, and it is something great about Dearborn Park. It was also, I don't know that it was the experience. Can you talk a little bit about your mom's experience teaching?
Yes. So when I was the fifth of 6 kids in the family, so her first experience teaching, I think, was just teaching all of us, getting us up and starting with us. But when I got to junior high school age, and I have a younger sister, we got old enough, our mom went back to school to get her to finally graduate from college. She had that interrupted. She had her high school education interrupted during World War II, when she was taken away, and Japanese Americans were taken away and imprisoned behind barbed wire during the war just because they were of Japanese ancestry. But when my mom went back to school, after getting her degree, she started working with Project Head Start, a preschool program for kids who didn't have as many privileges as other kids. And so seeing the work that she did certainly had a tremendous impact on what I later on decided I was going to do my education.
Well, I didn't know that. I knew about the Japanese incarceration. I didn't know how that interrupted her education. But then she came back not only to teach, but also to be a peace activist. And she's very well known in her commitment to the peace movement. So when you grew up, what kind of things was your mom involved in for social justice and the peace movement? And I would ask Yushen, if you could put the slide back up of Aki Kurose, and Paul, you can continue to tell stories about your mom.
Okay, so when I was very young, and I was almost too young to be aware of some of the things, being the fifth of six kids, a lot of this was shared with me by the older siblings in my family. But my mom, from early on, in the early 60s, was an activist. She would get out and be involved in a lot of the protests that were taking place against the war that the United States was involved in that time. And again, we grew up here in the Central District of Seattle. I say here because I'm actually living in the home that I grew up in. And growing up here in the Central District, living in the Central District, we experienced and witnessed much discrimination. Actually, even this home that I'm living in now, the realtors refused to sell it to my parents because they weren't white. So one of the things that my mom got involved with is some of the fair housing protests against discrimination in housing in parts of Seattle where families of color weren't allowed to live in certain parts of Seattle. Lots of times people, when they talk about these issues, they think, oh, that just took place down south in southern United States. That actually took place right here in our city. And so a lot of times when you look at how the north end of Seattle is predominantly white, that's because back in those days, people of color weren't allowed to live out past the U district in Seattle. So my mom got involved in some of those protests, and again, certainly involved in the peace movement. One thing that really, I think, connected her with the peace movement was when she did get taken away during World War II, when Japanese Americans along the West Coast in Washington, Oregon, and California were all taken away and incarcerated. One group that stood with us was the Quakers. And so I think that started off my mom's connection with the Quakers, and she really believed in what the Quakers stood for. You know, one of her first encounter with them was they were standing against the incarceration of Japanese Americans just because they were of Japanese ancestry. But she learned about, you know, their peace activism, and that was something that she became very passionate about.
She did. I know the picture of the stone beside you, and I understand that's a picture that you have behind you in your home. Sounds like a very Quaker statement from your mom. It says, if you don't have peace within yourself, learning cannot take place. I think every teacher could hang that and remind themselves and remind our students that having peace within is the start to having peace in the world. You know, another memorial, and I'll just switch a slide to the peace activism of your mom, is the Peace Crane Shrine. You want to talk about that statue in Seattle and where it is?
Yes, that statue is right across the street from the American Friends Service Committee building, which is where the Quakers meet. That statue is of a little girl. Well, she was a little girl during World War II who was a victim of the atomic bombing that the United States dropped on Hiroshima, Japan at the end of World War II. She suffered from the effects of the radiation from those those bombs. And she later died, but she had a great spirit about it, and she touched a lot of people. And so probably about 30 years ago, I think this statue was put up in her honor. My mom was involved with that. This Quaker Floyd Schmo, who actually took a delegation of American citizens to Hiroshima after the war to help rebuild homes. He was really involved in having that statue put up there.
You know, I'm hearing the story of your mom. First off, she raised the kids. She finished her education. She began to teach and began to work in the community towards peace. And I understand, do you have that proclamation? Where does peace activism lead in your mom's life? There's a presidential declaration. What was that you have there?
So I have a copy of this award that she got. It's a presidential award for excellence in science and mathematics teaching. And it was given by the President of the United States, George Bush. So she was actually given this award by George Bush. She really didn't like George Bush's positions on war. And so she has a picture of her with George Bush wearing this button that I have on right here, saying peace. So
increase peace.
Yeah, so she made her statement even as she was getting her award from the president that he needed to think more about bringing peace to the world. So, but she did, through not just through her teaching, but through her activism in the community, but really through her work with kids, made a real difference. And we're very happy as a family that she was recognized for that in life while she was still living. And then after she passed away, to have Aki Kurose Middle School named in her honor. So,
yeah. Well, kids may recognize this when we say this now, because Aki Kurose Middle School is very close to where we live. And the work that goes on there every day is a tribute to your mom's education. Before we go on today, is there another story you want to tell, something from your mom that might give kids an example of how, I don't know if it's something that happened at home that reflected your family's orientation towards social justice and peace, but I know that you grew up surrounded by love, but love that was engaged with the world. We all need that.
Yeah. So it's kind of related to that quote on that rock. You know, when I first saw that quote, I said, there she goes talking about peace again. And then, so I was kind of shallow myself. And then I'm a teacher, and then I thought a lot about it a lot more and really saw what she was talking about impacting kids, about the importance of all of us having peace within ourselves in order for learning to take place within us. And one of the things that really sticks out to me as a teacher, and I share this partially because I want to pass this on to the teachers at your school and for the kids, is how she would work with the kids. And I was an assistant principal at Meany Middle School for 1 year. And what she taught me didn't match well with what was taking place there. And I hope these things change. But when other teachers would put their kids out in the hallway to be disciplined, my mom would take those kids into her classroom. Even though they weren't the same grade level that she was teaching, she would tell me that those kids learned more being in her classroom than they did sitting in the hallway. And so she would bring those kids in. And instead of trying to teach kids a lesson by putting them out, she taught them a lesson by bringing them in closer and showing them love and care. And I think that's what really stands out to me as a teacher myself. And so that's just one story that I wanted to share.
Wow. It is really, it's wonderful. It's hard to put into words, but kids feel it every day. When a teacher teaches from love, it affects the whole community. And Paul, I want to thank you for coming today and sharing little bits of stories. I don't know if you're going to chime in. We look forward to talking to the other half of your family. Next week, your wife, Kathleen Vasquez, who works in Seattle Public Schools, is going to talk about her family growing up in an environment of social justice and some of the outstanding people that she got to know. But Paul, I want to thank you very much for your time today. And
well, I want to, again, thank you and really say how much I appreciate what you're doing in sharing these stories with the kids that you're working with. And again, what you started with, I think, was most important, that we honor all the women in our lives, not just during the month of March, but every day of the year. So thank you.
Okay. Well, bye-bye, Paul. Thanks.
All right.
Yep. Sadako and the paper cranes. If you don't know that story, kids, it's a beautiful one. Learn to fold cranes and bring peace wherever you give them. There's so many good books about Asian American people and Asian American boys and girls growing up. I hope that you dig in to our library and get some, because maybe the book is a mirror of a life like yours. Maybe the book is a window to a life that's different from yours. And maybe the book is a sliding glass door that once you read that book, your life will be forever changed. That's true of a lot of people and a lot of books. If you read them and enjoy them, your life is changed. I know that happened for me when I read Amina's Song, but then I got to read Power Forward and On Point, those books about basketball. And here's Henna Khan with a message to you, Dearborn Park.
Hello, friends at Dearborn Park International School. This is author Henna Khan coming to you from my car where I'm waiting to pick up a pizza. And I thought I would take this chance to say hello and thank you for reading my books. I thought that since it's Women's History Month, I would encourage you all to consider reading books outside of yourselves with female characters. And I hope that when you think of the Asian American community in particular, that you'll think about how all of us deserve to have stories that center us, stories where we get to be the heroes, where we're the main characters. We all deserve to read, we all need to read about each other to get to know each other better, to consider our histories and our experiences. And I hope you will look outside of yourself this month and always, really, and try to broaden your world by reading about people who are both like you and different from you. And hopefully we'll all start to see that we all have so much more in common with each other than maybe we sometimes realize. So happy reading, and I hope to connect with you again soon. Take care. Bye.
Every time you read a book, the author's talking to you, and it's a wonderful thing. These are some other authors. These are all Korean American authors. Some of them are friends. Janet Wong in the lower right with her book, This Next New Year, is so happy that it got translated into Korean. Janet is a friend who we will see again in Bookman's next chapter. Linda Sue Park, who has the adorable baby Yoda wearing a mask, staying safe, has organized kids' books by Korean Americans in the Korean diaspora, Kibuka. So many wonderful stories. Here's a message from Janet Wong.
Hello, Dearborn Park. I'm Janet Wong. I'm half Chinese and I'm half Korean, but I was born and raised in California. And I've written about my heritage and my childhood in several of my books, in picture books like Apple Pie, 4th of July, which was illustrated by Margaret Chodos Irvine, who lives in West Seattle, and also in poetry books like Good Luck Gold and A Suitcase of Seaweed and more. I've also written about my childhood experiences in This Next New Year in 3 different editions: English, Chinese bilingual, and a Korean English bilingual edition. I hope you've looked at my books before or will look for them. Let me share with you a poem called I Am Not a Pluquot from the Poetry Friday Anthology for Celebrations. This is celebrating Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month in May, but you can celebrate Asian American heritage and Asian American culture at any time. I am not a pluquot, but I kind of am. My father is Chinese. He was born near Guangdong and moved to San Francisco when he was 12 years old. My mother is Korean. My father met her in Korea when he was in the army. She came here as his wife. Each kind of Asian is different. Like Italian is different from French. Cuban is different from Mexican. And apricots are not plums. But sometimes you see pluquots, half plum, half apricot. Grandma squeezes a pluquot and says, just like you. I'm Janet Wong. I hope you'll look for this book or any of my books. Thanks. Hello, Dearborn Park.
Craig, you're muted.
Oh, back to screen share. Thank you, Yushin. That happened. Oh, let's get it back up to the right slide. Okay, thank you. You hear me now? On we go. Pramila Jayapal is a friend, and she's also a congresswoman representing our part of Washington State in Washington, D.C. She was speaking last night. I heard her talking about ways that we can help all families overcome the pandemic, how we can improve justice. And I'm proud of Asian women like Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. You know, you can learn about hundreds of people in Pebble Go. I always want to give a plug, because just when you think you know everything about everybody, you learn about somebody else, like the mother of physics or Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth. Kids, remember to go into resources and learn about all these great Asian Americans, and especially Asian American women, during this Women's History Month. Now, one author from Korea and America, Young Suk Choi, some of you will recognize her because she visited our school. Remember school? That was back before the pandemic, and we had guests in the library. Here's Young Suk Choi painting a dragon in our library to a 3-minute song. It may be a while before we can gather in a big group, but we're safe now so that we can gather once again and enjoy people like Young Suk Choi's drawing of the Dearborn Dragon. I hear lots of kids saying, oh, wow. Yes, indeed. She's a wonderful artist. Her books are wonderful. There's so many amazing women you can learn about. If it's Anna Wong, the actress, or Junko Tabie, the first woman to climb Mount Everest. Books abound in the library, and there's new books all the time. These young women were making an antibody book, a safety zine about living during the coronavirus. In that picture, that's before the virus. And then on the right is a copy of their magazine that they wrote together during social distancing, helping people be safe. Women do that all the time. And I thought, what would be more fun today than to end with a little bit of music? Now, Ruby Ibarra is a Pinay, a Filipina woman, a Filipina American. She's powerful, she's fearless, she's unfiltered. And she hopes that there's women out there, young women especially, who feel the same way she does. She wants to inspire you to use your voice, to claim who you are and embrace your identity. So from that little book, We Are Inspiring, I learned about Ruby Ibarra, and here's a little rap to take us out. You see in her song Someday, she says, "Mama, I know it's going to be fine wherever we go, because we know you raised this girl to dream and be a hero." And what's an ego to an eagle? Like, well, you got to hear her. I can't rap the way she does. Here's Ruby Ibarra to take us out.
Cause I want my life to change, tired of being shortchanged. I'm trying to remain sane. Hopped off the plane, didn't stop all the pain. My father's still in debt and we've been struggling to pay for a bedroom up on Meekland Ave. Reshuffle, just meet in half, hands tied against the odds. How the hell you even that? People from the slums once, now live in the humdrum. Mama from the bar used to be dreaming we could stunt once. Mama, I know it's gonna be fine wherever we go, cause we know your race is gonna dream and be a hero. With an ego to an eagle, I free flow when I speak though. My pipe dreams through a peephole, my skin so Filipino. Oftentimes my pride inside is.
Do you hear her spitting those rhymes? She's proud to be a Filipino because her mama raised her to be a hero.
Wherever we go, cause we know your race is gonna dream and be a hero. With an ego to an eagle, I free flow when I speak though. My pipe dreams through a peephole, my skin so Filipino. Oftentimes.
Oh, that's Ruby Ibarra rapping. Someday, we will all have a chance to be proud. I'm going to stop now and thank you all for coming. We'll stop this recording. There's so many more stories to share. Next week, we'll talk about Latinx women, women from the Spanish-speaking world. And I hope you'll join me. In the meantime, keep reading, kids. There's plenty of books. Read and enjoy. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming today, and we'll see you next week. And thank